Chapter 18, The War Room at Ashen Tales. From the sealed canticles of Seraphine the Listener, bound in silence and dust. In halls where old breath clings to stone and ghosts gathering grain, a blade was named, though it bore no steel. One born of hidden vows, another of harvested flame, and a third who stirs the ink of the forbidden. The table was set not for feast, but reckoning, and still the east wind whispered names not yet spoken in a tongue older than truth. The war room at Ashen Tales swallowed sound like a stone throat. Cold, ancient air clung to its walls. Vaulted timbers arched overhead like the ribs of a ship sunk in time, thick with cobwebs that trembled as the wind outside pressed against stained glass windows. Every step echoed a half-beat too long, like the stone remembered older footsteps and hadn't yet forgiven new ones. The draught carried not just cold, but the scent of old paper, wax, and something faintly metallic, like dried blood behind old nails. The storm had arrived not with fury, but with pressure, subtle, patient, inevitable. The chamber's central fixture was a scarred oak table, long enough for 12 lords and heavy enough to need no anchors. Now it bore maps and relics. Yellowed pages curled at the corners, ink faded with age. Iron markers held territory lines in place. Wax seals half melted marked the eastern front. In one corner, a dagger lay forgotten, rust claiming its hilt. Candlelight sputtered, casting tall, shifting shadows that danced across the tapestries. Ancestral figures locked in faded battle, their painted eyes tracking the room like watchers from beyond. Kael ran his fingers over the grain of the table. This room remembers wars. Fergus rubbed his arms. And ghosts. Thunder cracked somewhere distant. Then, a sudden gust slammed a shutter open, extinguishing every candle in a single breath. The room plunged into darkness. Heavy. Absolute. Living. Fergus's breath hitched. Kael's heartbeat slammed against his ribs. The dark felt close, like it leaned in to listen. Fergus startled, hand flying to his chest. Kael's fingers slipped to the hilt of his knife, senses flaring. It was smoother than he expected, worn by hands like his, long buried. He didn't speak again for a long moment, letting the silence press in. He could almost hear whispers trapped in the timbers. Then, Ashen Tales' voice emerged quietly from the head of the table, calm and crystalline. Val Torina. The word vibrated, not through the air, but through the bones of the room. The stone seemed to flinch. When the shutters clapped shut, it wasn't a slam, it was a seal. The old man's voice was low and crystalline, the syllables curling like incense smoke. With a flick of his wrist, the shutters slammed shut on their own. Then the candles relit, not with fire, but with an eerie white glow that hummed for a heartbeat before settling into flame. The flames burned too still, no flicker, no crackle, just cold light, steady and unnatural. It didn't warm the room, it touched clarified it. Thorn asked, tension audible in his voice, "That Keeper of Each Second Flame title, it's not just flair, is it?" Ashen Tales smiled. It was small and sharp. "I've worn many masks. Librarian's the safest." Fergus didn't reply. He wasn't sure he wanted to know what the other masks were. He stepped forward, robes whispering across the stone, and pressed his palm to the carved crest of House Ashen Tales set into the wall. His voice dropped an octave, thick with old weight. Ashen Tales stepped forward, his voice dropping an octave, thick with old weight. This room was built when Ashen Tales stood as a bulwark against Borgin incursions. Your line, Thorn, isn't just noble, It's old and woven with fire. The captain, Garrick, crossed his arms. The leather creaked. He should know the truth. It's time. Ashen Vale's fingers traced a line down the map, along the edge of the eastern border. Ashen Vale continued, voice somber as his fingers traced the map. Your father, Rogar Estenvale, was a lord in duty, but a man in love. Tamsin of Meros Vale. She was wild, clever, and poor. Not noble, but radiant. When she bore you, they planned secrecy. A child born of love, not alliance. Thorn didn't move, but something in his posture cracked, shoulders pulling inward just slightly, like bracing against wind that had already passed. Fergus sat straighter. His grin was gone. You were born under a lie. To save you. Ashen Vale nodded. Tamsin died in labor. Rogar, bound by politics, was forced to marry elsewhere. You, Thorn, were placed with two of his loyal housekeepers, Mairen and Herod, hidden in Cinderfeld, your stipend drawn from silent coffers. Thorn replied, his jaw tight with restrained emotion. They raised me. They were my parents. Ashen Vale spoke gently, as if to steady the truth with kindness. They were. But Rogar never forgot you. He petitioned quietly, persistently, to make you heir. It took years, but then came war. Ashenvale tapped the table once. Varen's eastern fields burned. The Zal bled them dry. The capital needed metal. Rogar's mine, Velitha, was rich with iron, rare quartz, and something older. Kael's brow furrowed. What kind of older? Ashenvale's glance was brief. Material with memory. The earth there hums if you listen long enough. Kael leaned forward. That paid for Thorn's claim. Ashenvale nodded. 5,000 gold in ore, enough to silence courts, buy ink, and convince the crown. Your legitimacy, Thorn, is not a favor. It's earned. Fergus muttered, almost reverently. Bought with veins of stone and blood. Garrick said grimly, arms crossed over his chest. And then the cost. Ashenvale's voice lowered. Returning from the royal court, Rogar, his wife, and 50 guards were ambushed. Precision kills, no spoils taken, no witnesses. Symbols scorched into trees, ritual wounds in patterns, blood magic, clean work, almost ceremonial. Fergus rubbed his arms. That's tavern talk, ghost stories. You sure? Ashenvale's gaze pinned him, his tone flint. Ashenvale's voice lowered, heavy with memory. Blood magic isn't myth. It's outlawed because it works. Pain given shape, lineage bent into tools. It came from the east, from the Borgine. Fergus stared. They say Selmira Varen's grandmother was Borgine. Ashenvale's look darkened. They say worse. Her daughters may carry the spark. Cruciatar especially. She doesn't fear pain. Silence returned. Even the wind had stilled. Kael asked quietly, his brow furrowed. Do you think Selmira killed Rogar? Ashenvale shook his head. I think someone did it for her. Or worse, because of her. Rituals need lineage and intent. That ambush had both. Thorn turned his back on the table, hands gripping the cold stone windowsill. His voice came ragged. Thorn spoke from the window, his voice ragged and low. Everything I am came from blood. Kael looked away, jaw clenched, not because Thorn's words were wrong, but because they sounded too much like truth. Love stolen, history silenced. My name paid in ore and ghosts. Ashenvale offered the words gently, like a balm to raw history. Your name was always yours. Rogar ensured it would be known again. Garrick stepped forward, resting a firm hand on Thorn's shoulder. "You're not alone, lad. We walk with you." Kael moved beside them, his voice quiet. "You've got family here, in more ways than blood." Thorn didn't speak, but his nod was slow, resolute. Ashenvale turned again to the table, motioning Kael and Fergus closer. Rogar's death didn't end this, it began it. The Varen grow bold, Selmira whispers to allies in shadows. Cruciatar bleeds the north, Malrek turns tongues in the east, and rumors of undead in the south. He didn't finish the sentence. Kael asked, his voice carrying quiet resolve. "So what now?" Ashenvale looked to them, young men caught in old tides. Ashenvale met their eyes and answered plainly. "Now you learn, you prepare, and you choose how this ends." He pointed to the easternmost map, where the forest bent and rivers split. Ashenvale instructed, pointing to the eastern map. "Fergus, you're with me. The library has more than dust. You'll learn the glyphs, how to read what should have burned." Fergus swallowed. "Right, glyphs. Ancient languages, cursed pages. My dream." But his knuckles tightened slightly on the edge of the map. He didn't joke again. Fergus blinked, voice faintly incredulous. "So not scroll sorting." Ashenvale's grin was all teeth. "You'll long for sorting by week's end." Ashenvale continued, addressing the others with quiet command. "You two train with Garrick at dawn." Kael nodded once, slow, like lowering his weight into a saddle. Thorn gave no answer, but he stepped closer to the table, hands flat, as if to steady something. Swords, command, diplomacy, field reports. "One day soon, you'll stand where Roshgar once did, and no map will save you." The wind pressed again against the stained glass. The candles flickered, but did not die. Ashenvale turned, his cloak swirling like shadow. "The second flame burns not for warmth, but for warning. Keep watch." Outside the war room, the wind howled again, this time not distant, but pressing, as if something unseen had come to the gates and paused. Not knocking, just watching. "The storm is already here,"